State Farm and DJ Dramos from Life as a Gringo know making smarter financial moves today secures your financial freedom for a successful tomorrow.
Tackle these situations in stride and yeah, of course, be annoyed when an unplanned expense comes up, but not let it be something that slows me down, right? As I did with repairing my credit, hiring somebody to do credit repair for me. That was a gift that I gave myself that allowed me to then, get my first apartment.
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. State Farm, proud sponsor of My Cultura Podcast Network.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything. I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony, air quotes nippy, Ames.
And this is A Little Bit Culty, a podcast about what happens when things that seem like a great thing at first go bad.
Every week, we chat with survivors, experts, and whistleblowers for real cult stories told directly by the people who lived through them.
Because we want you to learn a few things we've had to learn the hard way.
Like, if you think you're too smart to get sucked into something culty, you're already prime recruitment material.
You might even already be in a cult.
Oops. You better keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Season 6 of A Little Bit Culty.
Welcome back, everybody, to A Little Bit Culty.
As you know, we've already done an episode with an ex-member of the Jehovah Witness community, but people keep reaching out, and we realize that there is a vast range of experiences that range from a little bit culty to a lot culty from that community. And so we're still on the lookout for guests and stories to share here on ALBC.
Our guest today is filmmaker Scott Homan, whose debut documentary featured titled Witness Underground is shedding light on the ex-Jehovah's Witness experience through the lens of the underground music scene.
Scott's film delves into the journey of notable underground bands within the Culty JW organization and explores how it's possible to harness the power of art for liberation, even within the constraints of a tightly controlled environment. Just fascinating.
And he would know. Scott has more than just a little street cred in the subject, as he was raised a second-generation Jehovah's Witness in Wisconsin, where his teenage music community recorded albums while being influenced by everything J-Dub.
He later studied photography and digital media in Minneapolis and now runs Banana Island Films. And these days he's focused on telling stories about artists escaping cults. I like those stories. How about you?
Homan sounds like our kind of human. See what I did there?
Yes.
See how it worked?
We were excited to talk to him about his story and get his thoughts on how self-expression can help pave the way to healing. Wait, should we start a rock band maybe? Nippy you got this like frontman energy.
It's true. I've heard that, but I think those days are done. Although Mick Jagger's still doing it at 80.
I think we'd be more like Donnie and Marie, except married.
You're like the goth bass player?
Come to think of it, Donnie and Marie would be dream guests. Mormon sibling pop stars with a cult following. That's a culty trifecta.
Yeah.
I digress.
You did digress. Here's our chat with Scott Homan, director of Witness Underground.
Welcome, Scott Homan, to A Little Bit Culty.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey.
On the pod.
On the pod, finally.
Yeah, I love your show, and it's been a long time coming. It's been a dream, actually, to be on A Little Bit Culty.
Awesome.
Dreams do come true right here on the podcast.
How'd you hear about it? Curious.
Oh, wow. Since I released Witness Underground, our documentary, I've been trying to find audiences that aren't just former Jehovah's Witness groups. And there's a lot of private groups and quite a few YouTube shows and some podcasts on that topic. But for me, it's always, there's a whole world out there. Like every cult is there's a lot of similarities. And I want to try to bridge those gaps. And I feel like our film tries to do that. But like getting outside of the bubble, outside of the ex-Jehovah's Witness bubble was important for getting a film out in the world. And I like that you're both very vocal about your experience. And there's so many parallels. And actually, people wouldn't probably think of self-help or sex cult as a similar to a what people think of as a benign Christian group. But there's a lot of similarities to the control structures.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's looking for shows, and your shows just skyrocketed along with the vow. So
Yeah, we heard from a lot of ex-JWs. Well, JW, ex-JW, Mormon, ex-Mormon people who'd seen the vow, and they're like, holy shit, thank you.
Well, also we'll get into it, I'm sure, but JW hits all those things that we went through in a very, I find, a more intense way.
And are you offended, or are you okay with us saying JW or JW?
no, that's fine.
It's for efficiency,
Yeah.
really. Also, J-Dub sounds a bit like
Rapper's
like a
name?
rapper.
Or a DJ.
The first time I heard it was on a
DJ J-Dub.
a chairlift back in the day. It was like on Christmas, Jehovah's Witnesses flood all the ski resorts because they can't celebrate Christmas. So all these ski resorts are like playing Jehovah's Witness like church music, and people,
Oh my God.
everyone on the mountain's a Jehovah's Witness. So like this kid was like, "Are you J-Dub?" And I was like, I thought he was asking me something about marijuana, and I was like, J? Like, what are you saying?
You want to smoke a J-Dub?
Yeah.
Yep. That's awesome. So the Jehovah's
That was a long
Witnesses
time ago.
go skiing, and the Jews go for Chinese food. Just so
Yeah.
you know.
I've actually been going for Chinese food because like on Christmas, ever since I learned that. Jews, Muslims, and Jehovah's Witnesses hanging out at the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into, all the exciting things you're doing now, tell us a little bit about your story. I know you weren't born into the JW world. How'd you get in?
So my story is a bit strange. So Jehovah's Witnesses knock on doors, right? And that's like one of the few things they're famous for: that, birthdays, and the end of the world. No Christmas. My grandparents, in their early retirement, when they were like 55, hit the road and moved away. So like I didn't really know them, but they were living in Florida. I'm from Wisconsin. They lived in Florida, New Mexico during their retirement. And you'd land in a new place, cult members who are trying to find new members, recruit. You're an easy target if you're new in the neighborhood. And this is back in the early 80s. So there was no internet, hard to meet new people, hard to find community. And they were like ripe for the picking. And, they're getting older. So the idea of death is coming. And their big pitch is, you're going to live forever. So don't even worry about death. Death's not a thing for you. And they got hooked by the concept of millions now living will never die was the big slogan from the 1920s. And they were still selling that idea, even though most of those millions had died who read that book originally when it was hot off the press in the 20s. My grandparents were like, we're going to be part of those millions who never die. And then they influenced my dad and my uncle, and eventually and then all four of their kids, to join the religion.
Wow.
And then because of my parents' age joining the religion, then us kids were sort of influenced by that, even though my mom was sort of like resistant to it and still is resistant to a lot of it. Now she's pretty much towing the line, but after 30 years of pressure, she's somehow resistant to this cult. But I sort of had, if you were to break it down and oversimplify it, I had like a two different faith household. My dad was trying to join this cult and doing a poor job of indoctrinating us, but trying hard with his limited time with 5 kids. And my mom was basically like putting her foot down and saying, no, Saturday morning cartoons are okay. And so is baseball. And so are our cousins who are Lutheran and our non-religious family. So like I had like a dual perspective household without a lot of the rules that most of the indoctrinated and born-ins would did get. So I had kind of a lighter.
So you had compare and contrast abilities.
Yes.
Lucky for you.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate for that because in a way, I feel like I had a normal childhood. All of my high school friends would disagree with that because I missed all of the birthdays and a lot of the parties and didn't use any drugs. And I was unfortunately like in purity culture. So missed out on a lot of like coming of age moments that they all went through that I was not there for.
Yeah, rites of passages.
And for those who don't know, why is it that you don't celebrate birthdays and Christmas and any holidays or pledge allegiance to the flag or any of that stuff? What's the meaning behind that?
Okay. Well, there's two perspectives. One is
like what they say that it is, and then what it actually is.
He looked up to the left, like, oh boy,
here we go.
There's my Rolodex.
Ultimately, it comes down to persecution complex. And what they want as part of the indoctrination process, especially for youth, is to be separated from everyone else and then to make a stand for the cult, even if you don't even understand why. But then they try to logically, so you're getting removed from the classroom during the Pledge of Allegiance. You're not a part of all the birthday celebrations of all your friends. So you're not there for any of the important moments of those people's lives and the fun. And then you feel like you're missing out on something with missing Christmas, and everyone's talking about it for a month, and everyone's talking about their gifts and their family experiences, and you have nothing to say. And you like for that whole month and a half, and I still have this problem, you're sort of like left out. But then you have to find a reason why. You have to like, why are you doing this, right? So you have to make up your own conclusion. They will give you lots of logical reasons or spiritual, they'll call it a spiritual reason not to do so. You're spiritually clean and they're dirty pagans. But their reasons, the logical reasons they use a scripture so they can say it's Bible based and like God wants this for you. And only true Christians act this way. So birthdays, here's the Jehovah's Witness pitch. There are 2 times the birthdays are mentioned in the Bible. One is King Herod of Egypt, I believe, or somewhere in that part of the world. And he had a true follower of God in prison. And it was John the Baptist. And then he cuts his head off and served on a silver platter because someone wanted it on his birthday. And I might be missing a couple fine details there, but basically that's the idea. Like he's murdered. And then like also the baker who made the cake at another moment in the Bible. So all the people that are associated with birthdays get murdered, and they are not God's followers that were doing the murdering, and they were murdering God's followers. So from their perspective, that's bad. Let's see. Christmas is because basically all the holidays that are considered Christian today have no basis in the Bible, but are actually originated in the pagan world, and Catholics adopted them. And then so all Christians still do them because they're sort of normalized in culture. And all that's not like untrue, but that is their reasoning.
Right.
How do you define the persecution complex?
Oh, persecution complex is actually a concept I've been learning about more recently, but essentially, and I'm out of the religion 15 years, shunned for 15 years. So I'm sort of doing this channel, interviewing artists who've left religion, but I'm learning about some of these deeper concepts. And persecution complex is the idea that you want your cult members to believe that they are being attacked for their faith, but they're not. Like you just separated yourself from everyone else, and you ousted yourself. So like the idea of some bully in primary school is going to tell some 4th grader that say some mean things to him, use name calling or make fun of his religion. But that kid has separated himself from that class, or his parents told the kid he had to, or the teachers told the kid he had to because his parents made a big deal about it at the parent-teacher conference. And so the kid has been like basically kicked out of the class in front of everybody every single day for the last 5 years of his life, from kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade. And now some kid is bullying him on the playground because he's a Jehovah's Witness. So it feels like he's being attacked, but ultimately like he was set up for that situation. But then you're like, then you go home to your echo chamber of your parents or your siblings. You're like, someone said something mean to me on the playground, and that reinforces this idea that you're being persecuted.
Right.
Just to give a colorful example.
Yeah, actually, it's part of our cultural wars right now.
But it's also like when you say similarities between what you saw in The Vow, we were always being persecuted. There was always a bad guy coming to get us, or that was against us, and like that's what happens when you
victim perpetrator model
ethics, out in the world. There's going to be someone trying to squash you, and that also creates more isolation and then more defensiveness that we are doing the right thing because, of course, you don't want to be wrong. So it's a cyclical pattern. It sounds like.
Yeah, right. And there's the angle to it that only God's people will be attacked. Like no one's being attacked for celebrating Christmas in a Catholic village or whatever everyone's doing.
So it's a righteousness too. Yeah. Is this the 90s that you were growing up?
Oh, late 80s. My parents my dad started going to this religion and bringing us in and trying to do indoctrination lessons and stuff.
And were you a creative spirit from the jump?
I think so. Yeah, like my dad's like an inventor guy. My mom liked to play music and sew, and she's massive with baking and cooking, and that's like her art. And we were always encouraged to play and make things. So we had a pretty nice like world for the creative side of things. And kids have access. We were exposed to lots of different kinds of creativity growing up. Mm-hmm. And then the one that really stuck for me was music. My older brother got a drum set. My mom encouraged me to play saxophone because she played saxophone, but then eventually I got Nirvana's Nevermind and the Weezer's first Blue album. And I was like, I need a guitar immediately. And I started learning how to play guitar. So I mowed a bunch of lawns and bought myself a guitar because my parents were like, you can learn a Pink Floyd song on saxophone and then we'll get you any guitar you want. And I was like, I'm done. I'm playing punk rock. I'm playing alternative grunge. That's what I want to do.
Got it.
But yeah, so music became a whole thing. And my little brother and I played a lot together. And then we met a lot of other musicians in our high school later on. And we had my parents bought the neighbor's house, and we like built our own studio basically.
Wow.
How do you think that contributed to you ultimately wanting to defect? Because it seems like creativity would be that impetus, right?
Yeah. And it's actually, so I feel like music, there's a lot of pressures from the religion. And it wasn't so much that they were saying you can't play music in my world. Like elders in the next congregation over were musicians. There was a drummer who is in our congregation in polka bands. In Wisconsin, there's a huge polka scene. Like every wedding had a live polka band. Everyone danced polka until like year 2000. In my it's like a weird Polish German colony. But like music wasn't off limits. And my parents were big in music. They were a little bit on the loose side on that side when it comes to Jehovah's Witness stuff, because they were new in the religion and they also had a background in the real world. And they were big fans of lots of different artists. They exposed us to lots of music. My mom would buy us like explicit lyric albums from like rappers like as gifts, and she thought it was cool.
Oh, wow.
So we had like a very different than the standard Jehovah's Witness experience. But music, what I realized is like a lot of the musicians I was a big fan of back even in 6th grade, I was like, I recited Bomb Track by Rage Against the Machine as like a poem exercise in my 6th grade class. So I was already like listening to very rebellious themes, like anti-government themes. And in a weird way, like Jehovah's Witnesses are very anti-government. And so I was like, that's an interesting parallel. Like I'm proud of being anti-American and not standing up for the Pledge of Allegiance, because like Zach De La Rocha also does that in this song. And like I was like finding these weird parallels to like the resistance of that.
So you kind of found a parallel to Fortify?
Yeah.
What you were believing?
Like, and of course, like Zach's not singing about like being in a religious theocracy / cult to resist America or American imperialism. And I recognize the difference, but I saw the parallel. But those what I guess I think really happened was like punk music or anti-government themes in the 90s alternative music was really the thing that was giving me an education was from the music. And then I was writing my own music and trying to find my own voice. And I was writing silly stuff about, some cute girl and wanting to like hold her hand at the punk show or crowd surf with her or something, like silly teenage stuff, but, singing it in front of an audience and writing it and recording it and then playing shows. And, finding your voice is something that the religion's kind of never letting you do. Your voice is the cult's voice. You're preaching, you're knocking on the door with their literature, with their messaging, with their responses to resistance, to the ideas you're pitching. I mean, we're basically selling immortality, and all you have to do is be a slave for the rest of your life. And you might get a reward if you die.
And were you door knocking?
That's a tough sell.
Yeah, right. It's mandatory to door knock, or you'll get socially ostracized for not doing it. You won't get invited to the parties and social events and stuff.
And do they track you?
Oh, yeah. Like you have to turn in time every month. And if you don't hit your numbers, like you'll get a talking to. And people will start calling you unspiritual or bad association if you're not actually hitting your numbers. So it's like very regimented.
That would have been me.
Sounds like a bit of an MLM vibe to it.
Yeah.
Well, with that tough sales pitch, there's got to be something incentivizing you.
Their sales pitch is actually, you're going to see your dead loved ones stop mourning and imagine them in the paradise. Like basically like manifest them visualize seeing them alive again, and you're going to see them again. And like, that's the hook. That's the carrot on the stick, is anyone who's ever died, and everyone has someone who they're mourning. They're like, that's not real. Like they will be there. You'll just stick with us and you'll see them again.
I have a question, because we talked a little bit about this with Ian, who gave us a good overview of the religion, and we'll link that in our show notes. I never really quite understood like how that picture was painted so far as that so many people believe it. Like, I guess like I have certain beliefs around like, yeah, I don't really know, like this could happen or that could happen. Like, maybe it's lights out, or maybe there's heaven, or maybe I'll see my grandma. But like, how is it that believed? Like, you know what I mean? How do they get so many people with that vision of certainty? I mean,
emotional manipulation, the certainty of it. Well, they're always using the logical fallacy of appeal to authority, with the Bible as that authority. They're the only one who has access to understand the Bible, where all the other Christians are wrong. So basically, they do a dual thing where they're like, we are right. We're God's only voice on the planet, the leadership, and they're a book publishing company who are selling immortality. But every other religion's wrong. So a lot of what they spent a lot of time in the 80s and 90s on is that all religions are false religion, and all of their individual gods are false gods, and they are the only ones with the real God. And so if you point that lens at every religion, and like, here's the 14 reasons why the Catholics are wrong. Also, they are big on child sex abuse. And here's Protestants, and they're wrong because of this. And speaking in tongues isn't real with the Pentecostals, and over here and over there and over there. And they do that. So like all these other options are melting away for you, while they're the true, and they're the ones speaking truth, and they're giving you scriptural backgrounds, right? Or backup for what they're saying. And they do read their Bible. They read their own Bible, but they do read the Bible, and they're big advocates for doing your own Bible reading, but they're the interpreters, and you use their guides only. But it's a complex thing, and I think probably the best way to understand how it works is with the BITE model. It's not the best way, but it's a good way, by Stephen Hassan.
Right.
Behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control. And they've knocked those out of the park. They're experts at all four. And if you live and breathe that world with all the positive reinforcements and negative reinforcements and the rules and the social reinforcements for all that, it works. And anyone who does those things well will have a following and maintain control over their followers, I think.
Yeah.
Do you want to give us some examples in each category?
Yeah. So witnesses are kind of reinventing themselves. And every 10 years, you kind of wouldn't recognize it as a member. Like, it's an almost unrecognizable group to me, looking at it now after I've been out 15 years. But the most recent change, they're always changing something. And it's like like drip change until it's like a transformed environment. And one of the recent changes are that women are now allowed to wear trousers for the British.
Woo.
But, at church. So like women have the choice. And
Scandalous.
for them, they're like, oh my God, now I can go shopping and we can change our wardrobe. That's exciting. And so you have all these pictures all over the internet of active cult members wearing pants for the first time and taking new photos for their socials. But what that is that's not giving them more freedom. That's just turning the knob of control. And now they get to say like, oh, like those pants are a little bit like too flashy.
Can you wear sweatpants? Or they have to be trousers? I would not last long.
Yeah, they have their. It's really funny. They should start wearing sweatpants. That'd be hilarious.
Any call that's like, you could wear sweatpants, I'm in. I'm there. Anyway.
Another one is men are now allowed to wear beards. Like their founder had a super long beard in the 1800s, and Jesus in all their pictures has a beard. But it's been mandated they have to shave. Like, we would get counseled as teenagers for like our sideburns starting to grow, and like, you need to start shaving, young brother.
What was the reason for that? Or just to control?
Just a control thing. And now it's like, you can have a beard, but it has to be trimmed in a certain way. It's like, it's just a dial change. It's not a freedom.
Right.
Information control. They're not allowed to use the internet to search for things. They're only allowed to read their own literature. So like, a lot of people that leave the religion, they're like, I read their literature only, and then I left. Like, I unindoctrinated, I deconverted by using their own library only. But like, if you only do that, you'll probably reinforce those beliefs, not deconvert. And that's why they kind of put a ban on, like, Wikipedia is not accepted. The internet in general is sort of like, who knows what's out there, but they have their own website now and they kind of worship a URL. Information control is huge for them. And they change it. Like, if they reprint some new idea, they'll go back to the old literature and adjust what it used to say in the 70s. That if anyone does any research on their past stuff, it's like, well, no, we never said that other thing that you think we said. Like a 1984 rewriting of all the past. Then thought control, like, they have programming. Like, if imagine you're going door to door, riding the countryside in a car, going to some address where someone was nice to us a year ago. We're going back there, and like, you'll bring up an idea. Have you guys ever, thought about aliens? Something really ridiculous. It could be something very nuanced or something ridiculous, but like, the response would be like, well, we just don't know. And yes, the universe is vast, but like, it wasn't written. There was no aliens in the Bible, so we shouldn't really speculate on that. Or like, what happens to like all the aborted babies in paradise? Like, do they get a pass? Are they going to be resurrected? Are we going to be raising them? And they're like, don't speculate about the future. But then, of course, that's all they're doing is like pitching you a big speculation about this some imagined paradise that they're selling to everybody. but you can't imagine anything that would actually happen there practically. Or like, how do we roll out like the dead being resurrected, or like the burying of the bodies after genocide? Like, no, we can't talk about that. So like, there's a bit of thought control that's like reinforced in the culture.
Can I jump in there for a sec? It sounds also like there's a lot of thought control just in terms of what you can think. Like, and this is, I think, what the Mormons have this as well. Like, you're not allowed to doubt.
Parallels with Mormons. Yeah.
It's kind of sister religions. Mormons
you could say
and JWs. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of like, it's not okay to control your own thoughts, like your own internal gaslighting of like, that's the voice of, what do you call that? Satan? Or what's anything negative if you have a negative thought or a doubting thought?
Oh, they might call that, seeds of doubt would be, they use an analogy about like fishing, at least where I'm from in Wisconsin, like the tackle box, like all the different kind of lures that Satan can use to get you. And that's just like anything that you're thinking is one more. But also Satan can't read your thoughts. God always is. And demons are always watching what you do. Like there's like that going on. I kind of missed your off topic though.
No, it's fine. That's
exactly.
We just want to know like what's going on in the thoughts. Like how do they control thoughts in order to control?
Well, it's making your thoughts bad is what it sounds like.
Yeah,
your own
I think
thoughts.
also
Your own thoughts.
Like meditation's not allowed, and they generally teach that your thoughts are you, and that's an indication of you being a sinner and kind of you're just a bad person, and you require them for your own personal salvation.
Which is also like the opposite of meditation.
Yeah, this is all of them.
But like meditation teaches you like you're separate from your thoughts.
Yeah.
You can be you, and then you can have a thought which is separate, which I think is generally good. Unless it's transcendental meditation, in which case it's a cult. This podcast certainly would not be happening without our amazing, supportive, generous patrons. Are you with us? Come find us over on Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty for bonus episodes, ad-free and exclusive content, and the occasional Zoom with fan favorites from our past episodes, Q&As, and all sorts of goodies. It's fun over there, people.
Sarah, you know that chicken salad I love? My favorite place here in Atlanta?
I sure do, babe.
I was thinking about it just the other day.
You were thinking about the chicken salad?
I think about it more than I'd like to admit. I was thinking how great it would be to get that level of culinary satisfaction at home. No disrespect to you.
I mean, I'm going to try to not be offended, but I get where you're coming from.
Okay, just maybe I manifested it, but it turns out
He's manifesting now.
Cook Unity is the first chef-to-you service delivering locally sourced meals from award-winning chefs right to your door every day.
What about the price?
Here's the best part.
Yeah.
It's cheaper than any other delivery options out there.
Okay.
Don't believe me? Go to cookunity.com/culty or enter code CULTY before checkout for 50% off your first week.
That is a very good offer for our listeners. Tell me more about it, Nippy.
Every meal is handcrafted by chefs and made in local micro kitchens, not large production facilities.
Great.
Checkbox. Your food arrives fresh, never frozen, in packaging that keeps meals crisp in the fridge for up to 7 days. And Cook Unity packaging is compostable, recyclable, and reusable. I know you love that.
I do. That really floats my boat.
Plus, there are hundreds of dishes to choose from, and the menu is updated constantly.
Okay, people. Experience chef-quality meals every week delivered right to your door. Go to cookunity.com/culty or enter code CULTY before checkout for 50% off your first week. That's 50% off your first week by using code CULTY or go to cookunity.com/culty. There are some things in life that are okay to be a total crapshoot, like trying a new type of milk in your coffee. Hemp milk, anyone? Or making a cheap Instagram ad impulse buy. Red light masks? Guilty. Or rolling the dice on a new workout class. But finding the right doctor should not be a total crapshoot. And with ZocDoc, it's not, because you've got more options than you know. Being an adult has its high points, like you can eat ice cream for dinner anytime or watch scary movies after bedtime, but it's not all fun. You also have to do your taxes and figure out what's for dinner every freaking night, and making doctor's appointments. And for that one, there is ZocDoc, the healthcare app that makes adulting that much easier. Sometimes searching for the right doctor is a bit like Mad Libs. You need a blank specialist who takes your blank insurance, who is within blank miles of you, and who doesn't keep you in your waiting room for blank hours. ZocDoc makes it easy to fill in those blanks and to help you find the right doctor for your specific needs. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care to skincare, and so much more. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care to skincare, and much more. Plus, ZocDoc appointments happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments. That's what we all deserve. I use ZocDoc, and so should you. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/Culty. Find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/Culty. ZocDoc.com/Culty. You've heard from our sponsors. Now let's get back to a little bit culty, shall we?
It seems like the bite model, the way the Jehovah's Witness uses it, is to attack all things that they can perceive as a threat.
Yeah.
Like down to like the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Well, what if he sees the flag a certain way? You know, it's like anything that they're highly anticipated the potential threats to your indoctrination. It seems like it's well thought out as well.
Yeah. But they also have like 130 years of nonsense
refining
that they
it.
Keep on recycling. So there's like incredible amount of contradictions in their own beliefs. And then they pivot and switch. And anytime they're like, hey, this is what we now believe and you have to adopt it. It could be a thing that they were saying in the 1950s. And then they went away from it and you had to adopt the new thing. And now they're going back to it. There's a lot of that going on. And every single time they call it new light. And it's like, well,
new light.
Was it wrong? Then like, well, you guys were just wrong for 100 years. They'll never say that. They're just like, they're always, the light is getting brighter, they say.
That's right.
Okay, what about emotion? How do they control through emotion?
I think the strongest piece of emotion control is what I mentioned about the pitch of you'll see your dead loved ones. They're always on the lookout for someone who's gone through something heavy emotionally, and they will love bomb. They'll bring you in and treat you amazing and then say sweet things to you about how that emotional reality will all be taken care of very, very soon. Like the end of the world is around the corner and they will be the sole survivors of Armageddon, of doomsday, of Jesus murdering everybody, basically. The bloodbath coming bloodbath of anyone who's not a Jehovah's Witness. They're always talking about taking your houses and like basically having a zombie apocalypse, but like Jesus will take care of all the zombies too. So you don't have to worry about like anything after the end of the world.
Oh, like Jesus has his own cleanup crew.
Yeah. But you'll do all the body burying, but they won't like attack you, or they're not going to be a threat like in any zombie film.
That's very complex. Actually, you reminded me, Jess Tardy, our producer, shared that when there was a death in the family, she got a letter from neighbors who were Jehovah's Witness. Like she hadn't heard from them.
That's the emotion control.
Really?
They're waiting for that moment
manipulative.
Where you're suffering from something real to swoop in and tell you everything's going to be okay. And then they hook you. And then anytime you're like, I miss that person or I'm going through depression, it's like, hey, the new system's right around the corner, the new paradise, everything's going to be fine. And it's like, don't have emotions. Don't dwell on that dark side. We are the light. We are going to be guiding you to the amazing place, the good place in the distant, distant future. What's the near future in their mind?
That's such a, no offense to any Jehovah's Witness or ex-Jehovah's Witness listening, but it's just such a ridiculous carrot. Like it's just so silly that could even be a thing. But, we believe crazy things too.
Well, that's the whole thing about the coercive control. Like the content points almost don't matter. You got coerced.
Yeah.
Right?
I know we were promised our own personal selfish success. You're talking about success of
the process of hooking you emotionally is the same thing.
Yeah. But that I'm just looking at it going like, how do we know? Like it's something that's happening in the future. How do we know? Like I can imagine hitting my success as an actor is a possibility, but like all those things sound very like sci-fi-ish.
Yeah. And it's all out of your control completely. There's nothing you can do. They even quote the scripture like, by your works alone, you cannot get to paradise. Some loose quote. Like, at least with acting, you can try hard. You can learn new skills.
Yeah.
You can do a workshop.
What was the quote? Say it again.
By works alone, you will not gain salvation. I mean, I'm not quite sure what version I'm quoting, or if I'm totally off.
But it should be, by door knocking alone, you shall get salvation.
Right, exactly.
Salvation.
Well, one thing I noticed in watching the doc is And when you do music, I'd imagine you don't feel the ceiling of your life in the way that you feel like the ceiling, like you just touched on something, like you're de-incentivized. But music is something you can try hard in and get better in and have some sort of relationship with the laws of physics, cause and effect. Like sports might offer that, but I don't imagine you guys were allowed to do sports. But like there's no incentive if you're not inspired to, work hard, and they de-incentivize you at every point. So I imagine music was a great outlet for that.
Yeah, it was immediately a great coping situation because it's in total active presence.
Coping.
And so much of that religion is have anxiety about the future, but also have hope about the future. And they're never present really, except for when they're doing the religious work with the door knocking. It's like a public speaking exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But that's for them. That's not for you, right? Like you're being drained
Right.
when you're doing that. Nobody really wants to do that. But music is such you can do that alone. You can do it with others.
Yeah.
And it's very personal and immediately gratifying. In our movie, Cindy says like she would just play guitar and cry, and she wouldn't be particularly emotional, but like the act of being present and doing something for yourself is like, wow, I never do that. Have you seen Get Out, the film?
Mm-hmm.
There's something they show in Get Out. I just rewatched it where there's the real person is inside, and they show like the eye and like a tear. And I feel like those moments are like when you do something for yourself, like that person deep inside like gets to come out for the first time. Where the religion's telling you can't do that. You shouldn't do that. There's more important things to do.
Yeah.
Like you should think about your future and like living forever. Like why are you being so selfish? But really doing something for yourself is like the key to mental health.
Yeah. And love.
Yeah. You got me.
Wow, that's powerful. No, that's
so
powerful. No, that's so like.
It's so true. And I think the reason like you're able to speak or even make your film, or like with Ian Corlett as well, like you're at least two people that I know who had some outside connection. For you, music. For Ian, like he does voices for a living and he's a voiceover artist. But like neither of you, it sounds like, had extremely, I mean, it sounds like it was really hard, but you weren't horrifically abused. Am I right? Or were you? We haven't got to that part.
Well, not sexually or physically, but emotional, spiritual abuse.
Well, the system's abusive.
But emotional.
Yeah.
Emotional, spiritual abuse, 100%.
Well, it's an abusive system.
I'm not trying to
I know.
I'm not trying to make less of it. I'm just saying that I think the reason is that you're able to speak is because you had that sense of yourself.
Yeah.
Luckily,
I agree with that.
Before your parents got involved, and then during with music, thanks to your mom, right? Like what a gift that you had that connection.
Yeah. And I had a lighter experience, and I had an opportunity to get to know myself young at the important moments. Yes, I had to reject certain parts of society or relationships. I was enjoying myself. I was having fun. I was being me. I was playing at life, where a lot of witness youth don't get to do that because they're so indoctrinated or so following the pattern, the program. I wanted to say something about what I love about your show. And I think we have a similar goal, which is I love that you guys are both, you've talked a number of times on your show about like being such active members, recruiting people, and then feeling shame about that. And also looking back at that time to try to understand what were the motivations, the true motivations of why you were doing it then. And then also that is motivating you to do what your show, which is to show other people like, hey, people don't join cults. They do something they think is good for them at the moment, or is like a good thing for their family or a good thing for their future, or find a community that's safe. And I feel like Witness Underground, the movie, and the YouTube channel with like my ongoing interviews, it's sort of trying to change the narrative around the topic. Like most of what I see is like, oh, the cult, what did the cult member say yesterday, or something that's like newsworthy. But ultimately, like I'm proud of my background and the choices I made at the time. They made sense to me at the time. And I feel like you guys are doing a good job of kind of, hey, like anyone can be a part of something like this. And there's tons of different organizations that are using these unhealthy patterns to control you.
Yeah.
And I think it's a deep value that you're both offering with your show.
Thank you. Now you're going to make me cry. Trying to offer that anyway.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. That's the goal. I think I said in like one of our first podcasts, I want our story to become content and wisdom for people. And then I have a whole manifestation thing that I've just kind of realized about, because to your point, when we got in this, we wanted to do good, and manifesting do good. We were just aligned with something, and we ended up getting there now. If that makes sense.
Yeah, interesting, right?
So manifestation doesn't happen in the way that you manifest. It happens in the way that, like, there's something that maybe we had to evolve in order to get to that point.
Was there something that you learned from the actual program in NXIVM that you think your show now is actually like embodying?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It can't not.
A couple things.
I'd say one of the biggest things is we've sat down with a volume of people, thousands of people over a decade period of time, got to know people, learned to get into rapport with people, learned to get in rapport with people that we otherwise wouldn't have ever met, maybe didn't even like it sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's all sorts of skills that you do just by being around the volume of people and asking them the same questions over and over and over. You start to recognize patterns. You start to recognize that really human beings aren't that mysterious, right? And I think kind of going into what we do with that understanding, it kind of gave us, in a lot of ways, we were underestimated by people that came and wanted our story, because we would sit down with them and we could tell, like, you just want our story. You don't care about us. Like, those were things that we developed in because we could understand the intent kind of and feel it. So when we were out, I think it allowed us to make a lot of really good decisions to facilitate what ultimately ended up happening. There were certain things that weren't in our control, but I also think that's that whole manifestation thing that I used to poo-poo before spiritually. I feel like something happened here that wasn't really in my control. I think Sarah and I and enough of us have put out enough goodwill, and this is in the universe's hands, and I'm just making good decisions based on what I know and what I know to be inside of me. And then that ultimately kind of took care of itself. And I wasn't confident in that, right? So when I had the experience of that, I just go, okay, that's what this was about. That's why we're here.
That's the spiritual assessment.
Yeah.
Some people might say God. We don't use that in the vernacular. I say universe.
I don't. I never, me. No. I mean, obviously I never did that. So I was never that guy. But when it happened to me, I was like, maybe there's something to this.
You mean manifestation?
Yeah, manifestation. Yeah. Or whatever the word is you have for it.
Yeah. Almost everything I've ever created, I saw it first. And that's part of like the first practice.
Yes.
Like I could visualize the thing.
Yes.
And then it's a matter of, well, you have to go create that thing, and you're going to need a bunch of people to help you, and you have to put a bunch of money and time into it. But like manifesting, I feel like it doesn't work unless you work your ass off after seeing
it.
I agree.
You have to also work towards it.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Like plan your time.
Yes. You can't just think about it. To answer your question, then I want to get back to you. The other thing that
I love to do this when I'm a guest.
Yeah, I was like, I see what's going on here. But I would think the one major thing that was like a core tenet, and more so in later years, was about character. And it was often said, like, character is not character unless it's tested. Like, you might think that you are a type of person, but unless you have a moment that you can actually, like in the real world, that will tell you what your character is. And I feel like I got to test my character in the moment of, do we blow the whistle and put our lives on the line, or just pretend none of it ever happened and slip away quietly, which, we could have done.
And there's value to that. People can make that choice. Like if you're out there and you just want to walk away, that's fine. But some of us need to make a movie.
Totally fine. Yeah. Some of us need to make a movie. Yeah. And I totally respect the people who did that. I think for us, it was slightly different because at least for me, I'd been such a big recruiter. I felt like the right thing to do for me. And a lot of like overcoming things I'd been working on in XJW, like caring what people think, was something that, they called it like me disease.
Right?
Or
just
like,
building awareness around it was valuable.
But yeah, built awareness around it. But then when I actually had to be like, I have to really not care what people think in order to do the right thing. Those are two different conflicting values.
Oh, like the negative feedback you might get from the vow or this podcast?
Yeah. Yeah, from the podcast. But even before the podcast, before we even thought about the podcast, we were just blowing the whistle. We were, I was on the front page of the New York Times. I wasn't thinking about who would like me or not like me. I was like, this is what has to be done to shut the motherfucker down.
It's
also, it was kind of, we got dragged into the fight too, so it was like.
So what were you going to say?
Just the vow is so powerful. I mean, to take the guy, expose it and put him in prison and like expose all the dark stuff he was doing. And it's not just him, like the entire system that was built is amazing. And I even knew people that were like pitching me for their recruitment of NXIVM. When I was in LA, I went on a date, and this woman I was on a date with, she's like, this guy, he's like pressuring me. He wants me to give him $5,000. It's going to change my life. And I have to get and And then I found out like a year later, she's like, that was Nixium. And I was like, oh my God.
Oh my God. I probably knew the person trying to recruit her.
But anyway, the vow was just like, oh my God, powerful. Nice job.
Well, we didn't make it, but it was great to be part of. Back to you though. So what was your exit like? How did you eventually get out? Because I know you mentioned you've been shunned for many years. What led to that?
So my story, like I met a lot of people in the religion that I thought were interesting when I was still a teenager. But most of my friends were never in the religion. Most of my actual friends I grew up with were skateboarders, musicians, Channel 2, public cable access, TV friends from my hometown. I started meeting witnesses basically on my dad trying to convince me that there's actually interesting people and I should try it out and I should get closer to the religion. And I was like rejecting it. But I eventually did. And then I met all these musicians and started hanging out with them and had a lot of shared interests. But then most of them, out of like 18 teens that I was friends with, like 17 of them left their religion the day they moved out of the house. I was like, how am I the one who's still here? But I think it was partially, I was like, I can balance both worlds. And they couldn't.
Mhm.
They had to leave to make the life that they wanted to feel comfortable. Where I was like, it's fine. I can go to church, but I can also play music and I can do all these. I just like light experience on the fringes of the religion and the culture. So I kept going. Like I left at 19 for like mostly I just was like, I'm not going anymore. It wasn't that I like mentally left. So they call it physically in, mentally in, and there's physically out, mentally in.
Chemo.
Yeah. And then there's chemo's physically and mentally out. So you're like
Right.
pretending to go. So I transferred between some of those, right? And I went back to it, but I was like, I don't really believe a lot of it, but it's like for family or whatever, I can maintain both worlds, one foot in each door or whatever, keeping my worlds making sense for me. And eventually I took another gap where I was out for like 6 months and didn't participate. And I felt closer to God or that idea. Like I felt more spiritual not going to church. And I thought that was kind of shocking. And then at some point there were some things I wouldn't research. And so to make the long story short, I got real sick with a kidney infection and I was like bedridden for a week. And then some elder called me and this is what the impetus was. He's like, hey, how are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm really sick. He's like, well, we haven't seen you at church meetings. And I was like, yeah, I'm really, really sick. And he's like, well, I'm worried about your spiritual world. And I'm like, I'm sick. He's like, well, if you don't show up, it's going to be a problem. And he it was like this really like totally missing the moment conversation. And I was like, what an asshole. So that had an effect on me. And I'm shortening the story and it wasn't so dramatic, but like, I was like, you know what? I've never actually dove into like, what is the actual evidence for a global flood 4,500 years ago, according to their Bible chronology? And I found the only people on the internet. I did all this deep research and watched all these YouTube videos and read a bunch of stuff. I was like, there's absolutely zero evidence for that happening then at all. Like there's zero evidence. And I was like, well, that's not true. Well, what else isn't true? Well, I already don't believe like 90% of this religion. That was like the last thing I was holding on to is like evolution's not real or like the, Bible prophecy or something. And anyway, so like that was a huge thing. And then I went to one more church meeting after I was healthier and I could go. Then there was like a homophobic talk, basically bashing gays and just like in a really, really blatant way. And I was like, I looked around, it's like, I'm in a crazy cult. I was looking around all these people just like nodding their heads to like being homophobic. And I got up and I just like, I'm never coming back here. I don't believe any of this. And I don't want to be associated with any of these people. I've been hating it my whole life. What am I doing here?
Right.
And I never went back. Went on a big education campaign. And I think it's important to like, when you do get out of something, is to like fully wipe the slate clean. Like do your best to deprogram, to deconvert all the way. And then you can rebuild and add things back in as you have valid personal experiences or do your research. And of course, that's not just it's not a wake up moment. It's like I peeled one layer of an infinite onion back. And I was like, oh yeah, I've been peeling this onion back for a long time. This is just one more layer. And there's been many more since then.
Right.
There was that pinnacle moment.
The straw that, is it from the Bible? The straw that broke the camel's back? I feel like that's biblical. I might have made that up. Whatever.
I'm not sure
you
if
know
that's
what
biblical.
I mean.
We do.
Yeah, it's exactly a good expression.
Yeah. There's just a lot of camels in the Bible.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why.
There's a camel's eye.
Yeah, that's what it was. The camel's eye. For more background on what brought us here, check out my page-turning memoir. It's called Scarred, the true story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life. It's available on Amazon, Audible, and at most bookstores. And if you want to see that story in streaming form, you can watch both seasons of The Vow on HBO.
Sarah, you know that chicken salad I love? My favorite place here in Atlanta?
I sure do, babe.
You know, I was thinking about it just the other day.
You were thinking about the chicken salad?
I think about it more than I'd like to admit. I was thinking how great it would be to get that level of culinary satisfaction at home. No disrespect to you.
I mean, I'm going to try to not be offended, but I get where you're coming from.
Okay, just maybe I manifested it, but it turns out
He's manifesting now.
Cook Unity is the first chef-to-you service delivering locally sourced meals from award-winning chefs right to your door every day.
What about the price?
Here's the best part.
Yeah.
It's cheaper than any other delivery options out there.
Okay.
Don't believe me? Go to cookunity.com/culty or enter code CULTY before checkout for 50% off your first week.
That is a very good offer for our listeners. Tell me more about it, Nippy.
Every meal is handcrafted by chefs and made in local micro kitchens, not large production facilities.
Great.
Checkbox. Your food arrives fresh, never frozen, in packaging that keeps meals crisp in the fridge for up to 7 days. And Cook Unity packaging is compostable, recyclable, and reusable. I know you love that.
I do. That really floats my boat.
Plus, there are hundreds of dishes to choose from, and the menu is updated constantly.
Okay, people, experience chef quality meals every week delivered right to your door. Go to cookunity.com/culty or enter code CULTY before checkout for 50% off your first week. That's 50% off your first week by using code CULTY or go to cookunity.com/culty. There are some things in life that are okay to be a total crapshoot, like trying a new type of milk in your coffee. Hemp milk, anyone? Or making a cheap Instagram ad impulse buy. Red light masks? Guilty. Or rolling the dice on a new workout class. But finding the right doctor should not be a total crapshoot. And with ZocDoc, it's not, because you've got more options than you know. Being an adult has its high points, like you can eat ice cream for dinner anytime or watch scary movies after bedtime, but it's not all fun. You also have to do your taxes and figure out what's for dinner every freaking night, and making doctor's appointments. And for that one, there is ZocDoc, the healthcare app that makes adulting that much easier. Sometimes searching for the right doctor is a bit like Mad Libs. You need a blank specialist who takes your blank insurance, who is within blank miles of you, and who doesn't keep you in your waiting room for blank hours. ZocDoc makes it easy to fill in those blanks and to help you find the right doctor for your specific needs. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care to skincare, and so much more. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care to skincare, and much more. Plus, ZocDoc appointments happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments. That's what we all deserve. I use ZocDoc, and so should you. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/culty. Find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/culty. ZocDoc.com/culty.
Break time's over, people. Let's get back to this episode of A Little Bit Culty. It's a good one.
That was 14 years ago. Clearly done a lot of self-educating and deprogramming and healing, but I want to focus on the film. How did that come about, and how did you decide to use music as the vehicle for the exploration, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, some people have described my Witness Underground, the film, the documentary, as a documentary, and music is the set. If you can think of like a film set, where like it's not about music, but music is what like keeps the story moving forward. That's the world you're in.
Yeah.
And all the characters are musicians and artists, which I like that framing. My personal background, I was mentioning, as a teenager, I got into playing guitar and music. And we had this neighbor, our neighbor died, and my parents bought the house. I became like our music studio in the forest in rural Wisconsin. So like all hours of the night, all the kids in the county that had guitars, that liked any kind of like grunge or rock and roll in general, had their equipment at that house. And it was just a dedicated music space, and art space. And we ran that for years and lived there. I lived there, and then my little brother lived there, and it just maintained this thing. We called it The Crib because of MTV Cribs. So we called it The Crib Records. And I recorded my album there, and another band that came out of that space. That was like my first band. And we had a little tour around the region and made an album. We didn't record it there, recorded it in the other guy's garage, but garage band, actual garage band.
Yeah.
But it came out of that kind of community and space. But I realized after making my album and trying to make a band, like in the movie, it's like a marriage when you're in a band. Like the relationships you have are so strong and necessary that you have fun and you're playful and you're also like writing and you enjoy and there's cohesion socially. That's hard. That's really hard to maintain and hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have it, it's magic. And when someone has a problem and they need to leave the band, it's dramatic for the whole band and you have to replace them. And then it's a different vibe entirely. But then when the religion's doing that, then it causes problems. So I started having that problem early on. And there were like one guy left the religion and he wouldn't play music with us. And we're like, hey, like we're barely in the religion. Like we can still play music. He's like, no, you guys are Jehovah's Witnesses. And I was like, barely, like come hang out with us. And he's like, no, I'm doing my own thing. I'm independent. I'm like, okay, so we had to replace the bassist. And then the guitarist got kicked out of the religion for something sexual intimacy with someone. And so like he was out. So we had to replace the other guitarist. And I was like, man, I'm just going to give up. So I ended up giving up and I moved to Minneapolis where the film takes place, partially because I had a job and the other partially because I had gotten to know over those couple of years that there's other Jehovah's Witnesses who make music. And for a long time, I was like, I'm one of the only guys who do that and play both in the real world and also in that weird music space with religious people. And it's all secular music. We weren't like singing like kumbaya or like hallelujah or anything. We were like making music about relationships and it's totally secular type stuff. And that was really interesting. But I'd gotten to know this other whole community through the network. Like everyone there drives like 5 hours to meet their friends across multiple state lines. And I learned about Nuclear Gopher, this like music community and website that only had Jehovah's Witness music on it. It was like, oh, wow, that's like a really weird, interesting thing. That's like so parallel to my weird world. Been navigating my whole life. And I got to know some of those people and I moved there and I became friends with a lot of musicians that are now featured in the movie. Then fast forward a lot of years, that was sort of our college experience, me hanging out with them and everyone in our early 20s. It was like 20 to 24 years old span of time being super engaged and making art in Minneapolis with this huge community. It was like 400 or 500 people like in the art creation space there. And it was greater than Minneapolis. It went to Chicago. It was all the way down to St. Louis and it was all across Wisconsin, but like, pockets and small bands and groups. But people would drive like 4 hours to see, like come to a cafe to watch a bunch of witnesses play
that's awesome.
Their own songs. It was cool. It was vibrant. It was very 90s too. And it's a very nostalgic time. And if you remember the 90s, like rock and roll was basically pre-internet, like
Right.
now we have DJs. Like rock and roll is not so important anymore.
Peak living.
A lot of plaid.
Peak living the 90s.
Tons.
Yeah. America peaked.
Tons of plaid. Yeah, exactly. So later I had like a Channel 2 public access TV thing. And I went to work at a TV station as a audio and camera guy. The next town over, the bigger town, Wausau, Wisconsin. And then I went to school for photography in Minneapolis. So whenever I kind of gave up on music, but even though I was hanging out with the Nuclear Gopher kids, but I went to school for photography. So I was like in this visual arts train. I kept coming back to that. And I finally went and got a real education in it. And then the recession hit and I was traveling and like, we're talking like 2003, 2012 span, like a lot of stuff happened. And, I was traveling. I lived in Ecuador. I moved from Minneapolis to Florida, to Ecuador, to Seattle, to Colorado. And there's a lot of different phases of my life there. And kind of music wasn't really a part of it then, but I was doing camera work and visual work. And then I left the religion. So another huge traumatic thing. And then I went back to school for engineering. So I'm just like packing it all in. After leaving the religion and going back to school, I kind of had this break from the engineering thing where I was like, man, engineering's not really it for me. Kind of want to go, first of all, I want to live abroad properly. And I want to get back into filmmaking and camera work and visual arts. So I was like, I took some random thing where I could teach English in Vietnam. And I bought a camera and lenses again. And I had given up on the visual arts thing. I was like, no, I'm going to do it properly. I'm going to go, it doesn't matter where I am in the world. Like there's going to be interesting stories everywhere. And I went there and I found a music community. I started playing music again. And I realized again that I'm actually not that into this. I'm not actually like a lifer musician. I'm more of a visual arts person. I was like playing 3 cover songs a week. But then I was like, after I would play my set at an open mic, I would like record people that were doing amazing music. And I was just like, I'm going to start making music videos for these people. And I started making friendships, making music videos. And I started doing documentary work with people I met at that music venue. And I met this French filmmaker and I met this Vietnamese American filmmaker. And I started working with those guys and getting like a professional education. And it was then where I was like, I have a story to tell. It was like 8 years after leaving the religion where I was like, I should start trying to tell this story about shunning. Because I feel like, yes, the religion growing up and it was tough, but I also had really chill parents and a really chill family and a pretty relaxed environment when it came to the Jehovah's Witnesses compared to what you might think of normally or what people you might learn about on your podcast or interviewing people. Like, it's pretty intense. What really caused a trauma for me was actually after leaving the religion, was the shunning and getting cut off from parents and siblings. And I was like, how do you tell that story? How do you talk about disconnection in video and disconnection in documentary or interview? And so I started experimenting with that. I was making like creative short films there with these filmmakers. And I randomly hit up, I was like, man, I have all these musician friends that were ex-witnesses, but they're like, they weren't just ex-witnesses, they were friends. And that was like a connection that was deeper than the religion. And so I was like, hey, Eric and Cindy Elvendahl, do you guys want to help us with this 48-hour film project? We're doing this creative before sunrise style romantic film. And they soundtracked it like in 24 hours.
Was this the 48-hour film festival?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did it in Hanoi.
We did that in Vancouver too. I didn't know it was international. That's
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's an LA based small company, but like they do it all over the world.
Okay.
And so I got involved in Vietnam.
Amazing.
And it was so fun. And then just random like connection. It had been years since we'd really talked. And I hit up Eric and Cindy and they're like, they knocked out this amazing soundtrack. And then my French filmmaker director friend was like, I'm going to start hiring them. And he did. And then I was getting commercial work and I started hiring them and they were doing commercial songs for like custom songs for like commercial work. And then I started doing this interview series called XJW Coming Out, partially inspired by Eric and also this American guy I met in Munich, Germany. I interviewed one of my early interviews. He said he came out twice because he's gay, but he also came out of the religion. So he's like, he came out again. And I was like, oh, I love that as a title, like XJW Coming Out series, which was like documentary style interviews discussing disconnection from family, friends. And then with that, I was like, oh, this is bigger. And I'm actually really enjoying this. And it's like, it feels powerful. It feels rewarding and like I have deep purpose and meaning in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a commercial or like an advertisement or a music video. It's like, this is like about real life. This is about a real connection or disconnection. And like, what does it mean to build community after being dragged, through the mud by cult members over your own personal worldview? That we crowdfunded this documentary, Witness Underground. And it was all piece of like, I needed a big break.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't tell anyone I was a part of that religion for like 6 years because no one would understand it. No one has more than 3 minutes of their time to like hear about your traumatic moment. Even if they're a super close friend, nobody cares. They have their own stuff going on. But no one will even get it. It doesn't matter how many hours I spend talking about a topic, they'll never get it. So I wanted to make a movie because I felt like not only did I feel like it was an important topic for people to understand that this religion does this dangerous thing, but they're not the only one who does it. And that shunning is evil. And there's all these pieces I wanted to tell. I also didn't want to just look back and be like, oh, everything sucked.
Yeah.
Like I'm actually proud of some of the experiences I had. I'm like happy about my past. And I'm not just a weird ex-cult member.
Right.
I wasn't just some poor, sad cult member in my youth. I was like a minor rock star in my mind. I was doing documentary film and we were having fun and we were going on cool trips and like I had formative, important experiences with other cult members. And also I look back with great nostalgia on that. And I wanted to create a piece that was people could watch and be like, yeah, I had some fun as well. And it was cool. And like reframe how we see this experience, reframe how we show the world the cult lived experience. Because it's not all terrible. In fact, some of it is like limitations are like breed creativity. Yeah. And so like being extremely limited.
It's a really great point.
The cult mind frame actually made us think differently and thread the needle of life in a different way. That is really empowering. Like I'm actually becoming good at public speaking, but I was given a pretty good foundation as a cult member knocking on 1,000 doors a year. How to face rejection. I'm pretty good at being told no. There's some good in that.
That's what we got. Like, I mean, that's the impression the documentary gives, particularly following, I don't want to ruin it for anyone, but the shunning aspect of it. It's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking.
I highly recommend the film. And there's a couple moments that really stood out for me. One was the idea of leaving and creating your own Bible was one thing I really liked. Is one of your characters making his own little book of like different excerpts of essays. And I actually don't know what all the different things he pulled from, but works that had affected him spiritually that were important to him, which felt so.
I like that.
Yeah, Nippy and Nippy were like, oh yeah, we should do that.
We should do that with our.
We kind of have like with our bookshelf, and with our podcasts, like, but not an actual like this is our book.
I have a Word document with things I've cut and pasted over the years.
Okay, well maybe we'll pull it together.
I'd like to read the Nippy My Babel Volume 1 and the Sarah Edmonton.
It's a bunch of like.
Well, you know what?
A lot of it's quotes.
We are working on a second book that kind of encompasses the whole journey of the podcast and all the nuggets we've learned. So maybe part of it will be, at the end, here's our Bible or our Bible reference book, something. I don't know. Just riffing here.
It's a great exercise. Yeah. I think I would also like to do it.
We should all do it. Maybe we'll do it together. Maybe it'll be our... we committed.
We're
not online. Starting any more survivor groups because it's just it never works.
No. Well, you can do a blog.
You can do a blog. But the other thing that really stood out to me, and I thought of this actually after you went to sleep, Nippy, was just the metaphor. Actually made me emotional thinking about it. But the metaphor of, I loved how your people in your band like built their own space to play in. And you said did that in a slow-mo or like a, what's it called? When you speed it up.
Oh, the time lapse.
Time lapse, thank you. Time lapse of like putting this place together, cleaning it out and like setting it up. And I was like, what a great metaphor of like rebuilding yourself after something like this and creating a new space of self-expression. And I'm not sure if that was intentional or just a happy coincidence, but that really hit me. That your method was music, our method is the podcast, and podcasting for you as well, and just how important that is on the other side of this journey to rebuild something that's from you.
I love that. Thank you for highlighting that.
Was that purposeful or just happened to be?
I've been advised to say that anything positive people say about my movie, I should tell them that it was totally the plan to have that impact.
Well, it's just the depth of your genius. You didn't know, maybe. That's what you could write on.
Thank you. That was the depth of my genius. It was somehow intuitive.
Yes.
Actually, that's actually a really fun part of it because I was like, actually that band that you see play at the opening, like we bookmarked or bookended the film, and there's a transition from the past to the present in the film where you see a band play. And for me, those people, 3 of the members, Eric, Cindy, and Chad, were in High TV, which is the highlighted band. And those are the songs they're playing in the opening and closing are High TV songs. But Ryan and the drummer had never played with them ever. So, but they had Ryan had known all of them growing up. So like they were making music together and collaborating a lot throughout that time. But I really just wanted to have live music as a piece that bookends it, not just have archival music. And something about, like Ryan had a working studio in the library where he's showing you the books in the My Bible Volume 1. That's an actual working studio. Everything was perfectly set up. But like he showed me this other building. He had this dream. He's like, I want this to be my studio one day. I'm going to renovate it. I'm going to insulate it. I'm going to put this sound booth here and the bands are going to be here. It's like this. He just bought this property, has this vision for his future. And he's about to relaunch Nuclear Gopher, the music studio. And he did just relaunch it. So if you want to try to find some hidden gem on the internet, Ryan's Nuclear Gopher is back, which is really exciting. But when he was pitching that was 2018, right? And I just met Ryan for the first time. So like we'd met when you see him in the movie, that's him and I meeting for the first time. That discussion is us having our first conversation.
That's so cool.
I was doing what you did before this episode. You're like, don't say it. We'll save it for the podcast. Don't say it. I was doing that to Ryan. I was like, shh, no more talking. You sign this paper. You sit down in the chair. I'm going to turn the lights, sound, camera. Okay, now you can talk to me. But that was the second time we were meeting was when we were shooting at his house. And he said that vision. I was like, that's it. We're going to add a day to our shooting and we're going to clean out this shed because we're going to turn Ryan's dream into reality today or tomorrow for the shoot. And we're going to invite the band and we're all going to play. You guys are going to come and you're going to play. And they're like, okay.
I love that.
That's great.
Like, that was sort of like inspired by his vision for his own future to make that space the space. And so it was a collaborative genius that brought that all together.
You did intend on it. You just never know how that's going to affect anybody, right?
Yeah. That's a perfect effect. I really appreciate that. That's beautiful.
But Sarah and I both noticed how much better they got. Remember we were commenting like, oh my God.
They got really good.
'Cause you caught them early when they were younger. And then as they started they progressively got like, oh my God. We're like, oh my God, they're
so
good. They're good. Like it was cool to watch them get better over the years too.
You mentioned that there's sort of, maybe this is off camera, but like the film has this like slow character. It's like all character building and it sort of gets slow. And then it's like rocket
then
speed
sprints.
of like tragic losses.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to get to that rocket sprint moment like as soon as possible in the movie. But I felt like to care about any of this person losing all these things.
You asked what stood out. The other thing for me that stood out was the young man who lost his brother.
Ryan Sutter.
Ryan talking about how when he initially got baptized, his dad said to him, well, you were my son, but now you're also my brother. And that was sort of like weighing on him when he was telling his dad that he was, leaving and didn't believe anymore. And I'm like, what a terrible position to put kids into, to bind them with like I could lose if I step away, I'm losing my brother. Like I'm the closest connection you can ever have to another person, your parent, your brother, either way, losing your parent, losing your brother. Like his dad was saying, now that you are a Jehovah's Witness, we are bonded forever unless you leave. Like how terrible. What a horrific, manipulative, disgusting practice in a religion.
Yeah. And actually they do that to kids.
Yeah.
They want to hook you. They want you to sign basically their blood contract as a teenager before you're legally able to make your own adult choices for your future. And most people get baptized before they turn 18. And then they're held to that contract, given limited information and access, and basically told a huge, huge lie that you're like, well, I have to do this or I'm going to get killed by Jesus. So you're sort of like gun to your head. Like, what are you going to do as a kid without really knowing how the world works yet? And actually I don't know if you've been following the news, but Norway just did a huge trial on the human rights aspect of that. And they delisted Jehovah's Witnesses as a religion like a month ago.
Really?
That is amazing.
They can't even marry anyone because of this, because of exactly that. And it's not so much like baptizing children or teens. It's that if a teen does get baptized and then they make a decision as they're developing about their own spirituality and their own personality, that they don't believe it, or they make a mistake and break a rule, and then they're abused emotionally. And it's the abuse of children, emotional and spiritual abuse of children in that context that now Jehovah's Witnesses are no longer an active religion. They no longer get funding, and they can no longer even marry anyone.
That's great.
Because of that. And I feel like that's an amazing, amazing achievement for a government to see the human rights violations for even such a small and nuanced aspect of this destructive cult.
Wow. I hope America pays attention in Canada.
We should get
the rest of the world.
I'd like to get someone on the pod who helped bring that legislation through.
Yeah, that would be, if you know anyone that...
I can recommend a few people.
That would be great.
That'd be an interesting...
Jan Frode Nielsen is the name, I believe.
Did you ever read Leaving the Witness by Amber Scora?
Yes, I just read it a few months ago. So good.
So good.
I have my favorite moment, but what were you going to say?
I haven't read it in a while, so I don't remember. Maybe if you said it, I remember. But I contacted her right away through Ian. She's not doing interviews anymore. She's kind of moved on with her life. But I read it.
She was on Trevor Noah. What an amazing book release. She was on Trevor Noah for that book. I loved that.
I'm happy for her that she's moved on. But yeah, that was a really good book. What was your favorite moment?
She wrote something I thought. So I grew up with guns, NRA, like the gun side of America in rural Wisconsin. And she wrote something she was a missionary in China for the Jehovah's Witnesses. She said that she started thinking, what if the leaders ask us to do the dirty work for Jesus? Like, it's not Jesus who's going to come down. They have images of like him on a horseback, huge mega-sized Jesus on a horseback with bow and arrows, like shooting like meteorite bullets at earth, and like moms with kids running through the streets as like the enemies of God, right? Getting killed by Jesus. She's like, well, what if Jesus isn't going to do that? And the leaders instruct us to take up arms and kill everyone. She's like, would I do that? And she's like, the answers she was having in her internal like meditations on this problem were that she might actually do it. She might actually take a gun and start killing people, her neighbors. And I had similar thoughts. Like, what if this is all real and they're the voice of God and they're the only ones who know? I mean, they're constantly saying right now, like, we might ask you to do things that from a human standpoint will seem illogical. Like, they're constantly putting this idea in your head. And so to read that, I was like, oh my God, like they can really hook people. Like their own members are considering the possibility of having to murder everyone. Like that's not the kind of, I mean, they're considered a pacifist religion, but like they're also teaching destruction and doomsday and dark sides, like deep, deep dark side, end of the world stuff. So that for me was like, oh my God, I'm so glad somebody said that, because I've had that thought.
Wow.
And it scared me when I was a member.
Wow. Anything else we didn't cover that you want people to know, and where can people find you? And what's the call to action?
The most exciting thing ever, I've been working on this film for years, and distribution's been the hardest piece of the puzzle. I thought making the film would be, but now it's available wide public release on Tubi TV. And that's the best way to watch the film, support the film, share the link. And if you watch the film, leave a review and rating on IMDb. That's huge for us.
Absolutely will do. Count on that.
Thank you so much for having me on and for highlighting Witness Underground.
What socials do you prefer?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. There's a Facebook group and a Facebook page. So follow that for any of the latest news. I also have the website, witnessunderground.com, for where to watch the film. And also there's an ongoing project that most people don't understand. Like, I made a movie, but I also have been making a series and a podcast for years, also by the same name, Witness Underground, on YouTube. So if you want to support the project, just watch the content. Like, I have filmmaker interviews, author interviews, and it's not like, what did the cult leader say yesterday? It's inspiring conversations with people who have made a whole new life on the outside, artists who've escaped a cult and made a creative life on the outside.
That's great,
so
Scott.
Good. And yes,
awesome. Turn negative into positive.
Yes.
Love it.
Yeah.
And
it's our motto.
Yeah, I feel like we're really aligned on
That's
that.
our motto.
That's our motto.
With a similar angle.
I can't wait to be on yours, and you can ask you get to ask all the questions.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Congratulations on your work. Congratulations on getting out. Congratulations on creating a really beautiful, moving film, which also was kind of fun to reminisce about the 90s. So
I know. I was like, take me back. Take me back.
Yes.
All right.
So till next time, be well.
Thank you so much.
And God, I almost said like God bless, but I don't even say that, but I just felt compelled to say, but like, it's something like that.
I saw a skit called Jehovah's Fitness, and it was like a workout place for Jehovah's Witness. I'll see if I can find it.
That's awesome.
It was funny. Anyway.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
That was a great interview. Really appreciate you guys.
Of course. You like what you hear? Please do give us a rating, a review, and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen. Every little bit helps us get this cult awareness content out there. Smash that subscribe button. You know what to do. Thank you, everybody. That was our chat with Scott Homan, and we wish him nothing but the best with his creative projects and everything he's doing in the XJW community.
We've done other episodes in our Culty back catalog in the XJW movement, and in fact, we just caught up with Ian Corlett recently. Check out our Ian Corlett episode for more JW context. Plus, Mega Man's a funny guy.
He is a funny guy. Mega Man, back on the scene here in Vancouver. So good to see you, Ian. So great to chat with you, Scott. And how about you, listeners? Are you an XJW with a story to share? Get in touch with us on our voicemail line or at littlebitculty.com/voicemail.
Talk to us. Tell us a story, ask a question, or share something that really chaps your ass about a culty situation in your life.
We also have a very special all voicemail episode coming up soon on the pod, and you could be featured. Listen, it's been a wild and crazy summer, but we've packed our microphones in our beach bag, so
and
don't worry.
We, that's me.
I packed mine too.
I packed the microphones.
Okay.
Go on.
Nippy's the big microphone bagger. We've got your culty content covered.
Okay.
And if you want even more, we will be on Patreon with some incredible bonus content with ex-DOS slaves and NXIVM coaches that you've never heard from before in your life. They've never been interviewed.
Just listen to you, DOS slaves.
I know, it just sounds so salacious.
Oh my God.
Join us there on Patreon for some special content. Until next time.
Don't join a cult?
That's right, babe.
That's our tagline. Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean. I'm hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We're heading over to patreon.com/a-little-bit-culty now to discuss this episode. In the meantime, dear listener, please remember, this podcast is solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. It's not intended as a substitute for real medical, legal, or therapeutic advice. For cult recovery resources and to learn more about seeking safely in this culty world, check out a-little-bit-culty.com/culty resources, and don't miss Sarah's TED Talk called How Cult Literate Are You? Great stuff.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production, executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound and our co-creator and show chaplain / bodyguard, Jess Temple Tardy. And our theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant.